Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you and welcome to Islam and Life with me, Tariq Ramadan, broadcasting from London. In today's show, we ask the question, is traditional Islamic clothing appropriate in today's Western world?
The topic of Islamic traditional clothing has caused a number of issues around the Western world. This is due to the idea that it is seen as a foreign identity overtaking Western culture and thus may be intimidating to Westerners. This creates a battle within society, whereby Westerners become defensive while Muslims feel marginalized. The banning of the burqa in France and Belgium raised this issue to the spotlight and highlighted the concerns of both parties. This week's Islam and Life asks, is traditional Islamic clothing appropriate in today's Western world?
In the 80s, we heard in France first and in many other countries afterward, problems surrounding the Muslim presence. First, we were talking about the headscarf in schools, and then we started talking about the niqab, which is the cover of the face, and everything which has to do with the visibility of the Muslims was perceived as problematic, and mainly the clothes. And what we heard in the West is this new visibility is problematic. Why? Because it's a sign that the Muslims are not integrating, they are not part of the society, they are not assimilating to the society in religious terms, in cultural terms, even in social terms, as if they were segregated from the surrounding society. And we have every day, every 6 months, a new controversy here and there about this visibility and the Muslim dress and the Muslim clothing, as if it's not a modern way of dressing, it's not a modern way of life, and it's showing how much Islam is alien to the West. And we need to tackle these questions and to understand, is this a real problem, and what is the true problem behind all these controversies? And to answer all these questions, I'm joined by my guest lecturer in Arabic and Islamic Studies, Amra Bone. Thank you so much for being with us today. Let me start with the first question. Almost every day in one country in the West, we have a problem with the visibility of the Muslims, and it's very much focused on the way the Muslims are dressing and the way they are visible in the society. So what is the problem? How do you see this problem first before coming to this perception that is alien to the West? What is the problem?
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for inviting me. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I mean, even the question that Islamic clothing, for me it's, is there Islamic clothing? There's definitely an idea of modesty in Islam, and how modesty is defined in different cultures is different. So this word, Islamic clothing, for me, I personally don't find it, appropriate, because to me, Islam has a concept of modesty for both men and women. And how it's played out in different societies depends on their cultures, their form of dress, and so on. So for instance, for example, in Pakistan, you have Muslims, and you also have Christians, and you may have few Hindus or Sikhs living in that society. And if you go to the area of Punjab, for instance, everybody is wearing shalwar kameez. And shalwar kameez with a shawl, and it's often on the head, and sometimes it's not. But that dress is defined as a modest dress, as long as it's not too tight, not too revealing, which sort of most people would understand that it's not modest. And as long as they're wearing that, then that is a modest form of dress for that particular society. Now, if we come to Europe and say, for example, Britain, there is definitely a concept of a modest dress even within the British society. I meet women all over the place, particularly in the trains when we end up talking, and there are many older women saying, oh, they don't like girls showing their bellies, and you know, everything is hanging out, and it's not modest in their eyes. So we do have a concept of modesty, but how do we...
So if I listen to you, you would say there is an Islamic concept of modesty, but there is not something which is Islamic clothing per se, something which is, it's not there. So that's a very important point, because it means, in fact, that the Islamic concept of modesty will deal with all the cultures and find Muslims should find their way. Yet, and this is a very important point that you are making, is we have to avoid saying that there is something which is a format or something which is a pattern that we have. This is Islamic and this is the only way. No, it could be an Islamic way of clothing or dressing in Egypt or in other countries. Yet there are principles that are perceived, or some Muslims are saying this is Islamic. When it comes, for example, to covering the face, not all the scholars agree on this. When it comes to the beard, for example, this is a sunnah which is known as a sunnah, and the people are saying, yes, that's fine. You may have different cultures and different ways of being modest. That's all fine. Yet, if you go to Britain, where the majority of the Muslims there are coming from India, Pakistan and Asia. If you go to Germany, the great majority of the Muslims are coming from Turkey. And in France, the great majority are coming from North African countries. Still the problem is the same everywhere.
Yes,
the Muslims are visible. So, and it's perceived as they are visible in the way they dress, and it means they are alien to the Western and the European culture. What would be your answer to this?
Well, I mean, I go back, say, 25 years, and 20 years ago in my school days, there were about 40% Muslims in my school, and there was definitely a concept of modesty among the Muslims, Muslim girls' parents would often ask the school, can our girls wear trousers and blouses that are sort of long enough, and that was allowed. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't as obvious, let's say, as it is today. And so when the Muslims weren't wearing, you know, long beards or huge scarves, the concept of modesty was still there, and the parents were asking schools, is it possible? And I remember myself, I went to work actually in Woolworths a long time ago, and in fact the manager there asked me himself, would you like to wear trousers, knowingly that I was a Muslim, and I said, yes please, thank you very much. And in fact the other girls were a bit, you know, jealous of me because they had to wear skirts and they felt rather cold in the winter. So, you know, so the people were aware of this concept of modesty. But I think over the last 20 years, Muslims have become very sort of confident in the sense that they want to the confidence that has to be shown in a sense. They want to be seen, you know. I also remember in my school, Islam wasn't mentioned much, hardly any time. I mean, my headmistress didn't allow one of the boys to even pray in the car park. Now, everybody talked about Judeo-Christian sort of values and so on, and yet we had 40% of the students in that school who were Muslims. And I think Muslims felt sort of like that they weren't there, you know, they were like, it was almost like a sin of omission that people did not acknowledge them. So it was a process of learning and wanting to find out who we really are. It was identity crisis in a sense that, you know, at home parents want one thing, at, you know, school teachers are asking for different things. Who are we really? And then they went about learning about Islam. Now many young people you know, felt, oh, they must learn Arabic now. They don't know the Quran is in Arabic, and therefore, and so gradually, you know, it was that they started to wear clothing, long beards. The Muslim girls started to wear scarves, and it sort of, like many of the parents, Muslim parents from Asia weren't very happy actually. They wanted their children to be not so obvious in a sense.
Yes, but you know, there is something in what you are saying that is sometimes said by some populist or far-right party by saying, you know what, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, you are very, very calm, and you are very, very, you know, low profile, so to speak. And now you are becoming more confident because the numbers are increasing. You are more and more Muslims, and you want to show to the people that you are Muslims.
I don't think it's necessarily...
So the point, no, I want you to clarify this point, because they are saying you want to show that you are different, you are confident, and your confidence for them is perceived as arrogance. That you are arrogant, it's as if now you are here and you know that you can just show it. What is your answer to this? Is this because going through the identity crisis is one thing, to explain this evolution is another?
I think it's a process of trying to find out who you are. I mean, I know girls in those days when they started learning about Islam, gradually from not wearing, you know, anything necessarily even modest, they went from one extreme to the other, and they were straight into jilbabs and, you know, huge scarves and so on. And I'm seeing those same women from that extreme to wearing, you know, well, some people, you know, I mean, excuse my wording, I don't mean necessarily extreme, but it would seem to some people that from one, when they weren't wearing particularly just generally Western clothing, to then saying, I am now sort of practicing Islam and wearing, you know, sort of long jilbab and scarves and so on. And then it was perceived as going from one extreme to the other. Now, from those women, I have seen now come, if you'd like to say, come back right to the middle. Now they're wearing very similar clothing to myself, and not necessarily feeling that they have to wear these overgarments and you know, and black and grey. And so I think that this was, you know, process of sort of finding yourself, who you are, and when you're a baby in Islam, you want to have everything in black and white. You want, this is right, this is wrong, this is halal, this is haram.
But that's all. Yes.
And you see, what I'm trying to say is that Muslims have, you know, gone from almost sort of not being recognised at all to now in your face, which. And then many are finding that even for the very own, for themselves, they're finding that it's hard for them to live in this society.
Yes, but what you are talking about is coming from within the community and understand this. And I think that we have this evolution, and sometimes trying to find the middle path, the right way of being a Muslim. Now, even in the way you are dressing, in the way you dress yourself, with simple, you know, in some countries, just wearing the headscarf, for example, in France, it's perceived as a very negative way.
Yes.
So even in the middle, even if you have beard like myself, you know, and you have people saying, oh, you are too much a Muslim to be a good
your beard isn't long enough to even be...
For some Muslims, I'm just, I'm not following the Sunnah, and for some Westerners, it's already too much. So what would be your advice to Muslims? How do you see the reaction of the Muslims in such an atmosphere where they are perceived as alien? You, the way you are too much a Muslim to be a good British. And the same, you find this everywhere. Now you have this, you know, even the American president having girls with headscarf in one of the picture, removed the picture because they were, you know, Muslims with visible Muslims. So what should be the answer? Because we have scholars today saying the best for the Muslim is to become invisible. Be invisible. This is the only way you are going to be accepted. Is this the answer? Can we be a modern Muslim dressing the way you are and like the Muslim should wear the dress?
I think if you go back to theology, for instance, and you know, Islam is not rigid. Islam is, what does the Quran describe itself as? God says it's a guidance for humanity. Now, this guidance for humanity is given to us in the way of stories of the people of the past. It's given to us in the way of actual role play, for instance, in the time of the Prophet, may peace be upon him. So we have these stories along with actual incidents from the times of the Prophet, from the time of the Prophet, but they are to be taken as a guidance for us. And when you come to the actual verses, for example, in Surah Nur, which is chapter 24, verse 31 and 32, initially God is asking men to the believing men to lower their gaze and guard their private parts, to be modest, and then asking the women to also lower your gaze and guard your private parts, and then on top of that, there's an extra guidance given to women that your bosoms are not something that to be displayed. Use your khimars, which is your scarf basically, and use that to cover your bosom, and basically don't walk in a manner that is, you know, provocative, or and then those are people that you can sort of be absolutely relaxed with, and you don't need to worry about clothing as your mostly your male relatives. Now in that ayah, in one particular part of the ayah, which I'm quite intrigued about, is that God is saying that, you know, cover this, cover that, other than what is ordinarily apparent, which is how it's translated as. Now, ordinarily apparent, in brackets, there are interpretations. So what you have, interpretations of various scholars saying it's just everything, cover everything, except face and hands. So the Quran is not making it absolutely clear. It's saying use your khimar to cover your bosoms. Now, these are interpretations by various scholars from different times to our times, that you must cover everything except your face and hands, and others say you must even cover your face, others say you must cover even your hands and your feet.
But
we do have another interpretation which is not highlighted very often, and that interpretation goes to very early on, in fact, which is that to dress modestly according to your society, and that wasn't so restrictive.
No, but this is very disputable. But my point is not this one. My point, just before you carry on, my point is: do we have in the West to go as far as this, because there is a pressure, because the people are not accepting the way we dress, to go back to our scriptural sources and to try to find a way to adapt? Do we have to do that? No. Is it not our right to say, look, we can dress the way we want?
You see, it's the flexibility I'm talking about within Islam itself, that it's not, I mean, as far as we see it, it's not made as rigid for the men as it is, you know. I mean, if I were to see you somewhere else, I wouldn't necessarily be even sure you're a Muslim. You could be a non-Muslim, because I see many men with beards, like small beards, wearing suits, trousers, and what makes it obvious for women is the scarf in particular. And so we are definitely, they know I'm a Muslim. So that very sort of prescriptive manner that we have for a woman, that everything is on face and hands, it has been there. But I mean, you have, for example, the message of the Quran by Muhammad Asad, who has been, the message of the Quran is translated by Muhammad Asad, and he mentions that the very early interpretations, and particularly he says mentioned in Fakhruddin Razi, and who mentions Ibn Kifl and so on, they say that the dress was much more modesty according to your society. Now, how that is played out depends very much on your society. For example, in Pakistan, for instance, you know, putting something on your head when you go out of your home is regarded as very modest, but it's not to the degree that, oh, your hair, little tiny hair must not be shown, or your, you know, it must be up to here. So it gives that flexibility within that society. But in practical terms, what does it mean for Western Muslims, men and women? What does it mean, what you are saying? It means that we have to change our understanding of the scriptural source. I'm asking, I want you just to respond to this question. What does it mean when we have, you know, people are telling Muslims the way you dress is not right, is not modern enough, it's just backward. What
shall the Muslims do when they are facing this in practical terms? You know, even if you may find, you know, I was talking once to a Muslim saying, no, you know, the long beard is a wajib, so you have to do it. Yours is not the sunnah. And I was arguing with him. Now, is his right to think that this is an obligation for him? What shall he do when in this society, because of all the pressure and the media pressure, the long beard is perceived as, you know, he's a fundamentalist and a terrorist? And he was not. He was a very gentle man. I don't agree. I didn't agree with him, but still, what should be his answer?
I think as honest and sincere Muslims, we should do what we think is the best for us as Muslims in our society, in the sight of God. Now, that may vary from person to person, because sincerity is something that, you know, comes out of here, right from your heart, and you want to do what is best for you and what makes you at ease within yourself, because you can't go about wandering around thinking you're doing something wrong. Because, you know, if a Muslim, say a woman, is being told that if you don't cover your head, you are, for example, sinning, and she feels guilty, although she doesn't wear it, but she feels guilty and she's not really at peace, and so on. So it's for those Muslims, the man who said to you, you know, beard is wajib and so on. So I think what he has to go back to his Islamic learning and teaching, and understand the wider, sort of broader...
No, but facing the society, he can just go ahead with the way he is dressing, with the long beard or the niqab. Would you advocate that?
I wouldn't personally say that we must change because there's an outside pressure, but I believe personally that Islam and the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet are not rigid. Islam is not meant to be rigid. Islam is flexible and for all times, and therefore, you know, let me just say, I mean, I love wearing long skirts, but when I was coming up the stairs on the at the tube station, it got caught under my foot. So, you know, I normally prefer wearing trousers. Simply, it's easier to walk, and I won't get caught anywhere. So for me to wear a skirt, to perhaps not as long that I can be caught. So when I was coming up the stairs, I had to hold my skirt to walk. So it's about being practical. It's about being sensible and reasonable. That's what Islam's about. In the Quran, it's so many times Allah's asking you to use your mind, use your senses and your intellect to come to. So what I am saying is that we don't need to be forced by anybody. We just need to look at our own heritage,
okay, we will end
theological
with this.
teachings, to say there's far more flexibility.
Thank you so much for that. I think that we will take the last point, which is a very important point. You have an Islamic understanding. Whatever you follow, at the end of the day, it has to be your choice. And if the West or people around you don't understand, it's still your right to go with sincerity with what you think is right. If it's and this is something which is important. Islam and the way Islam is flexible means that we have to deal with the surrounding world with our principles, and this has to be understood. And well, that's all we have. I'm sorry, that's all we have time for. Please let us know your thoughts and views on any of the shows we have seen, and here is the way to contact us.
Islam and Life welcomes your opinion, so please send us your suggestions as well as criticism on any of the shows you've seen or would like to see. You can share your thoughts with other Islam and Life fans, engage with debate and view past shows on our social media platforms. Tweet us at Islam and Life TV or join us on Facebook by liking our page Islam and Life on Press TV.
Finally, I would like to thank my guest, Amra Bone. Thank you so much for your presence, and I hope to see you next week, inshallah.